Good afternoon and evening. Welcome to the third session of the tips and strategies for finding a living kidney donor. I see a lot of familiar names, so it's great to see you back 3 weeks in a row. We greatly appreciate your ability. This is our final session. Now, that doesn't mean it's the end. It's the end of this session, but I'll give you at the end more opportunities to stay connected and engaged as we move forward. So today's topic is managing obstacles and stress while looking for a living kidney donor. As some of you have been on this journey or maybe looking to start this journey soon, I like to say no journey is cookie cutter or perfect. This journey is a bit of a roller coaster, to be honest, and sometimes you just need to take one day at a time and think of that end goal and keep that positive outlook has always been my go-to with that. So today, we're going to dig into this topic of managing obstacles and stress while looking for the donor. And, some of that information, it might really relate to you. And so just remember to be kind to yourself, ask questions if you're not sure on something, and just know that you, along with everybody here, you're not alone in this journey. And so we appreciate you guys being here and taking this time with us. Again, if you're joining us for the first time or not, again, my name is Kate Chong. I'm the Director of Programs for the Kidney Foundation BC and Yukon branch. I'm also going to be a bit of a moderator and not always as planned. I'm also going to be sharing a bit more about my journey as well today. But a few technical things, of course, you logged in today through Zoom. If you have the ability, I think most of you are looking pretty good for your names, but if you're not sure, on the top right of your picture, there's 3 little dots and you can rename yourself so that hopefully especially when we get into those small groups, those are really beneficial to have names and faces connected to that. All right, next slide, Christina. Thank you. Okay, so as I kind of alluded to, a little bit of a change in how we're flowing today, but it might bring a little bit of excitement to our conversation. So once again, a huge thank you to everybody. This is, that's been involved with this project all along. It is a huge team effort, so this can't happen without a number of wonderful people on the back end, so thank you. Following these few slides, we will be actually sharing my story, which I'm excited to share with you guys. And hopefully it helps you in your process to know that you're not alone. And then we'll jump into a bit of educational component with the lovely Christina Schellenberg. And that I will be kind of piping in here and there, either based on my professional hat or personal hat, depending on what seems applicable at the time. And then after that, as we did the last couple of weeks, we'll teleport into smaller groups. This really gives that opportunity to have a conversation amongst others and making sure that you guys have a space to feel like you can chat and ask questions amongst each other. So, and then we'll do a few final words and head off for the rest of our evening. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So this has been developed, as I stated, the last couple of weeks here in BC. Therefore, some items may not apply depending on where you're joining us from today. As mentioned, the first section will be recorded. And if you are a healthcare professional, you can stay in the main breakout room or this main room instead of in a breakout group to have those conversations. All right, and our land acknowledgement, of course, it's important to recognize the Indigenous land that we are on, inspired by the 94 recommended calls to action made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Land acknowledgements are a necessary first step towards honoring the original occupants of a place. They also help Canadians to recognize and respect Indigenous peoples' inherent kinship beliefs, and when it comes to the land, especially since those beliefs were restricted for so long. I acknowledge it with gratitude and respect that I'm joining today from actually Vancouver, the Coast Salish and the Kikite people and Tsleil-Waututh. And they are the original keepers and guardians of the land on which we live, work, and play on. And if, again, as always, there is that chat variation at the bottom there that you can always write in if you'd like to share where you're joining us from today. All right, so we're going to dive in to number 3 around the obstacles. So again, I'm going to take you through my journey. And then as Kristen has nicely in the session, we're going to take you through some of those common obstacles that people face when looking for a living donor and possible solutions to these obstacles. They'll also name the common sources of stress that the journey sometimes can bring forward and when looking for a donor. And lastly, brief on some brief tips on how to cope with the stresses and where to get some help if you are in need of that. You want to say that our intention from the session is to not give you all the answers, of course, to what you're going through, but that will solve those obstacles. But it's also our intention to provide individuals and not our intention to provide individuals counseling sessions to help with cope but this is your individual as an experience. This session will provide a broad overview, and we hope that you'll come away knowing that what you're experiencing is normal and that there are others that are going through. And so we want to validate your experience, that it's not always easy. So thank you for being here today. All right, so you get to hear a little bit more of me. In my first introduction, I did say I do wear a couple hats. And so today I'm just going to kind of share a background of my story before we dive into the kind of piece here. So my journey began over 13 years ago. And at the time, I was kind of mid-20s, living my life, not really realizing I was dealing with headaches. Anyways, I landed in hospital and I remember them saying my kidneys weren't working. And that was a really sudden work. I wasn't really sick otherwise. And I got transferred to a bigger hospital and I was just on the cusp of maybe needing dialysis. And this was a huge shock. But my way to, I guess, kind of dive into a disease, not really knowing much about kidneys in general at the time, was what can I learn about, kidney disease in the journey? What are my steps to be able to go through this process? And then how can I help others not have to go through this process? And so I feel like actually within 5 days of getting out of hospital, I was reaching out to the Kidney Foundation, actually just saying like, how can I get involved so I can help others that are going through this journey, even though I'm learning myself. And so that began my journey of kidney disease. And I was able to thankfully stabilize for a number of years with medication and a general healthy lifestyle. Again, not that I was living a bad health lifestyle, but just really had to focus in on, what I was eating, my medication, and staying active. And along that journey, I met the lovely love of my life along the way. And he knew when we started dating that my journey it would be a lifelong journey, and he was game for it, so I appreciated that for him. Little did we know, we got engaged and got married, and our goal, my goal in life was always, even though I have this disease, my goal is to try to have a family. That was always kind of forefront, and to my healthcare team it was very clear that I wanted to make sure that we were work towards or hopefully have a family. And, so we started that journey. And unfortunately, before living with reduced kidney function, my function started to decline. With medication changes, it didn't go well. And so the need for transplant was apparent. And that was pretty devastating. I was told, I'm sorry, you can't have a child right now, and you need to find a living kidney donor. And so that started my journey of looking for somebody. And, I know last week we talked about social media and putting it out there. And, I was active on social media and I thought, okay, I'm going to see what I can do here. And I had actually had a page created for me when I was first diagnosed, kind of to help me. It was called Kidney for Kate. And I think Christine actually used a few screenshots from that last week. And I had a friend that had gone through the process, create that page. So I kind of reactivated that page and started posting just general education and then letting people know where I was in my journey. The hard part around the journey, right, is not always knowing. And we're going to dive into that a little bit, about like, are people getting tested? Where are things going? And I think the big thing is I knew my husband had stepped forward to get worked up, which was easy to have something to keep my hope alive. But as we'll talk about as we go through the obstacles sometimes with that there's good and bad. The good part about my story is generally it was a pretty kind of like storybook, like, okay, this is, starting, found a donor, moved on to transplant, fantastic. Doesn't mean that there weren't roller coasters along the way, of emotions, of highs and lows, and being able, but having a community behind me, let that be strangers who I had never met, maybe just online through different connections with the Kidney Foundation, to my friends and my family. It kept my hope alive that I had someone behind me and I had people behind me to go through that process. So who knew, the man I had just married about 9 months before or so, was my actual perfect kidney match as well. And I am so fortunate that I avoided dialysis probably within days of needing it. And so it was close. And that was where, some of those challenges and emotional roller coasters was preparing for dialysis was a possible reality. I count my lucky stars every day that I did not quite have to. And I've been able to successfully have that transplant. And as you can see there, I, have successfully had my beautiful family that I had always dreamed about. And on the bottom left there, or at least on my screen, it's bottom left, is my little munchkins, Addie and Ashton. And my oldest will be 4 here in a few months, and my little guy will be 2. And so I'm forever grateful that my team, my community helped me go through this process. And hopefully some information today will help be able to, go through this process for you as well. So let's get into the content, and I'll pipe in here and there while Christina does some of the wonderful resources and possible obstacles. Christina.
Great. Great. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Kate, and we look forward to hearing more from you as we go along. And so, as Kate said, my name is Christina. I'm a transplant facilitator in Fraser Health. However, my background is in social work. So for 8 years, I worked at St. Paul's Hospital in all the different and all the different kidney programs in transplant, dialysis, and in the kidney care clinic. So I've had lots of opportunity to walk with patients through this transplant journey. So yes, let's jump in. So, in these next few slides, I'm going to share some common obstacles or challenges that patients spoke with me about. And I wonder if some of them will land with you, or if they don't now, maybe at some point. And again, we hope that some of our suggestions can help you along the way or encourage you. So a common obstacle that people come across is not having a lot of social connections. So I often heard people say, I don't actually have many friends or family to share my story with. And for those of you that were at the first session, sharing your story is simply getting the word out there that you're looking for a kidney donor. And so, this is a difficult one to tackle, and I'm not going to pretend that I have a magic answer for you. However, I want to share just a few things that, some patients that I know some people that I know have tried along the way, if this is a concern for them. So the one thing is that, even if you have one person to help you, that can really help spread your story. So think about the people that are in your social work, in your social circle. Maybe that is just one friend or one family member, and considering asking them to help you share your story. And of course, even one person can spread the word further than maybe you would be able to. If you are comfortable with using social media, of course, social media is a great tool to spread the word to people you don't know or maybe have never met. And Kate will go into this more later, but there are great groups at the Kidney Foundation, like the Kidney Friends Circle, that can help you make some connections, help mentor you through the process. And I don't know, Kate, if this is something that you've also come across with some of the people that you talk to in your role.
Yeah,
the
thanks for
Kidney
asking.
Foundation?
Yeah, definitely, social media can be overwhelming at times, and we kind of tackled that a little bit last week. But sometimes just being able to go on, and I have to give props, and I've seen a few very courageous posts this last week, actually, and it may be from patients themselves or family members doing that on behalf of and putting that word out there. And so it warmed my heart to see that it's a small community in the end, right? That's the amazing thing. And I think sometimes if you're feeling that you maybe don't know if there's someone right in your immediate circle, but sometimes, talking to your social worker about like, hey, this is a main concern, like you've heard, Christina, but also there are people in the community that are passionate around this and might be willing, if you're, on Kidney Friends Circle or somewhere else and you hear that they're like sharing the word for others, they might be willing to share your story too. And so to know that there are people out there that are passionate to be able to share that information out there. So if you don't have someone immediately, there's a really cool community out there to help you.
Another common thing that I've heard people say to me is, oh, my family and friends are too old to donate. And what I always say to that is, you're not the doctor and you don't get to make that decision. So we always tell people, don't self-select people to be your potential donors. If someone is interested in donating, let them come forward. And believe me, the donor doctors will turn someone down if they're not healthy enough. So some people are very interested to hear that there is actually no upper age limit for donors. You do have to be over the age of 19, but they don't actually specify, the kidney doctors don't specify a specific age for donors. Now, of course, I don't think in BC there's ever been a donor in their 80s, I don't think, or 90s, or of course over 90. But we certainly have had donors in their 70s. Now, the main thing is that the donor has to be healthy. So it's more about health than it is about age. Now, of course, you might be right. Maybe your family and friends are too unhealthy, too old to donate. But there is still a way if people want to help you. So we keep talking about these donor champions, and it's no mistake here, this donor champion has gray hair. If someone can't donate to you because of their age or they're unhealthy, there is always the possibility that if they're open to it, they could help spread the word for you. And that's also a wonderful gift that someone can give for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if a few of you were able to jump on the webinar last week around kind of the inspirations of living kidney donors, and we had a number of wonderful donors from across Canada that had stepped forward, a few altruistically, which are even more amazing in the sense of they've come forward with no direct connection, and within my role I get to see this quite often, and I'm always so curious when I talk to them. I said, like, what if you mind sharing, why have you, like, may I ask why you've stepped forward? And they had seen something out in advertisements throughout the community, and they just had this feeling that I have two kidneys, I only need one, I want to share with that. When it comes to social work, one of our speakers was an altruistic, and she was 76 when she donated. And so it is about more the health than the age of the individual. And then I think Renee and Jim last week with their speech, they knew that maybe their circle of friends may not be the best candidates, but they asked them to share the word out there. And so, those people that they shared to, then they shared it, and maybe another 5 people saw it, and maybe they felt the pull, and so they shared it as well. And with time, it's amazing how that story gets out there at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe you can relate to this. I'm a private person. So this is, a really huge challenge for some people if they are private. Some people have never been one to share with others about their personal business, their health problems, and now all of a sudden they're faced with the task of trying to find someone to donate an organ to them. So that's a really big leap. And I've spoken to people who haven't even told their spouse that they have kidney disease. So certainly, if you can relate to this, you're not alone. Other people do feel this way as well. And I've talked to patients who've said, they kind of feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, of course, they want the benefits of having a living donor, but on the other hand, they really don't want other people to know something that's so deeply personal. It's a very vulnerable thing for them to put out there. So, again, I don't have a magic wand to help necessarily in this situation, but I wanted to offer a few things to consider if this is something that you can relate to. First of all, I want you to consider, how you might feel if the roles were reversed. So if someone you loved or someone that you cared about needed some help, but they never gave you the opportunity or the chance to offer to help. Sometimes that can help to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes. I also want to say you don't need to go from 0 to 60. So you don't need to go from keeping it all to yourself to yelling it from the rooftops and telling strangers in the supermarket. So I would encourage you to consider going a little bit out of your comfort zone and maybe telling one person and then seeing how it goes. And so, I really want to stress, the baby steps in this, but it is a big challenge for some people. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, Brenda was a perfect example in week one in her personal story, and her brother being a very private person. And, in the end, he just kind of said, you do what you need to do. And I'm just go for it, sort of thing. And sometimes you just have to have that disconnect with that piece as well. And I think, it was perfectly said at the end of last week's one, it is a hard thing to put forward, and but you would be amazed with one, sometimes people are like, wow, I didn't realize you were going through this. Giving the opportunity for people to be more aware of how many people in their life maybe are affected with kidney disease, and then being able to not lose out on maybe time. Like if you're able to get in before dialysis, just having that extra time back. And I know one of our facilitators shared that in their group as well of they kind of, as such, kind of missed out on a couple of years that they waited for that deceased donor, which is totally fine. That is a way, and thank goodness for that option, right? Absolutely. But having the opportunity to be a bit more vulnerable and put your story out there. It might make some really special connections and the most unlikely conversations. I think my favorite one I've heard was someone was just at the bank doing a transaction, and they, started clearly, I think it was a smaller community. They kind of knew their bank teller. They started to have a little conversation, found out, and that person was like, felt that conversation and went and got tested and ended up being a match and donated to that person who was a customer at their bank. And so sometimes the least likely moment you might have a conversation might last, might be a lifelong, conversation that will have wonderful outcomes, sort of thing. So you just never know.
Absolutely. Something I also heard a lot from patients was, well, I couldn't put someone else's life at risk for my sake. I couldn't take a kidney from someone else. And, obviously that is a very understandable and common concern. So what I would always say to patients about this is, it's important for you and your potential donors to know that there are many safeguards in place throughout the process of donating to ensure that if someone willingly and voluntarily gives a kidney, that they can live a long and healthy life, a life just as long with one kidney versus two. And, we can legally perform this operation in Canada and across the world because of these safeguards. And I've listed some of the safeguards there. Every potential donor is carefully and thoroughly checked. They're given all the information about risks. They can choose to back out at any time. They're never hurried or pressured by the donor team. And the whole process is confidential. And so, of course, there are risks to every surgery. And again, the donor team will outline those very carefully. And, truthfully, the donor team turns down a lot of people, which can be pardon me, which is a good thing, you know, that can give you confidence that if a donor makes it through the process, the doctors are very confident that it won't negatively impact their life long term.
Absolutely.
And so I want to make just a little note about the confidentiality piece, that last safeguard point. So the donor team and the recipient team, so the team where the patient is getting the kidney, they're purposely separated. So as a kidney patient, you actually will not know if someone has come forward to start the donor testing unless that potential donor tells you themselves. So this is just to ensure that there is no coercion in the process of donating.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think, you know, this one, and maybe I can speak to, you know, in my personal journey, of course, you know, putting that story out there. And, you know, I remember my girlfriend being like, I really want to, you know, step forward and that sort of thing. But I knew she was wanting to have a family herself. And I was like, no, like, you don't worry about me right now. That's where, you know, that sort of thing is. But for like my husband's perspective, you know, he wanted, you know, for me to feel better, for us to be able to fulfill and live our life as best as possible. Of course, I still to this day, and I'm giving him a hard time. I wish he was on this right now to give him a hard time because every year they get a blood test and they're supposed to do their blood pressure monitoring through their GP to make sure to check in on them every year to make sure that they're doing okay. And my husband, I've been giving a hard time because I go monthly blood work and he only has to go once a year and he's still below, he's late to do his this year. And I'm just like, it's comforting for me to know that he's doing okay because that's definitely a big piece. We don't want to, but like Christina said, the medical team make sure that everything, you know, is in place. And it's honestly, for those that step forward, it's also a really great health check to see like if there's any concerns. And I know Renee mentioned that for a few of the donors that step forward for them, you know, it highlighted something else that needed to be looked into and may have actually possibly saved their lives in the meantime. So there's the ability and to know that they're not just going to move forward with anybody, that there is that safeguard for our wonderful donors, and that, you know, they do go on to living, you know, those first couple of weeks, they aren't the most comfortable, you know, based on my husband's experience. Now for him, because he went through the living donor process, you know, he within probably 2 weeks would say, if I could do this again, I would, because he saw the immediate impact to my health and improvement in that short time period that it was, you know, it was so rewarding for him to see that wonderful impact right there. It's definitely, you know, something, those first couple weeks are a little bit rougher for both people, right? It's, you know, it's this major surgery. But, you know, there are people that are living amazing lives afterwards being donors and they're doing great things. And sometimes, you know, doing crazy exercises and things like that, that maybe, you know, they may have not even been doing beforehand, but they continue to do things afterwards that they were doing before. So knowing that, and if you're not sure, talk to your team about, you know, like, okay, what are the steps if you want to get into details about like, hey, what makes me feel better about asking people is a big piece.
Exactly. Feeling in the dark. So this is a common theme that some people with kidney disease do face as they're going through this kidney transplant journey. And what I mean by that is that, you know, as I previously mentioned, the donor process is confidential. This is a really good thing for the potential donors that are coming forward. The frustrating thing is that sometimes, you know, if you have some potential donors starting their workup, you actually may not know about it. Again, the only time that you would be made known that you have a donor in testing is if the donor tells you themselves. Then the only other time would be if the donor has gone through all their testing, they're approved to donate, and they've agreed to move forward. So this can be unnerving for people because, you know, maybe you're doing all this work and getting the word out and you're not getting any feedback. You don't know if all your efforts are worth it. And so, you know, I wish we could have it both ways, right? Where as the kidney patient, you could know exactly what's going on. And the donor could be have full confidence in their privacy. But unfortunately, that's not how the system is set up to kind of cater to both sides. And so, it is important, if you do have a potential donor, it is important to, keep them updated about your medical condition, but it's important to try not to pressure them. It's important that a person who's donating a kidney wants to do it, and that they're motivated to do it, and they're doing it for the right reasons. Sometimes there are potential donors who are going really slow with their testing, and that might be because maybe they're having second thoughts. Or it might be because they actually don't know that time is of the essence. So that's why the updates are really important. For example, let's say you are getting nearer to needing dialysis. You have someone who's doing their testing, but you're not sure what stage they're at. Just let them know, hey, talking to my doctor, sounds like, in the next few months, it would be a good time to have a transplant, and that might get them going with their tests. But again, important to not rush potential donors along the way, as tempting as it may be. I know, it's a very difficult position to be in. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, from a perspective of knowing one of the people that were going through my testing process, the reality is, he was keeping me right in the loop of where we were. And, I knew what stages were to come next. And, but he at one point said, Kate, I feel like you're putting all the eggs in my basket, and it's stressing me out a little bit. And it was a reality check for me that, oh my goodness, yeah, like, of course, because I was on this trajectory that if he wasn't going to be the match, that I would need to start dialysis. And so my hope was with him because I knew exactly where he is. So just every so often, it was one of those reality moments of going, okay, right, I got to step back and realize that he may or may not be my match. And, if he isn't my match, then we might have to look at paired exchange or see if somebody else is in the process. And I knew my brother was getting worked up as well, but was numerous steps behind. So then my mind and shift of thoughts had to change a little bit to being the reality that I might need to start dialysis. And that was a really tough one for me, for sure. But still keeping it hopeful that, okay, well, maybe he'll be that match. And we found out in kind of an odd way of how we were going to be a match. I kind of unofficially found out, probably not in the way that I was supposed to, sort of thing. So that wasn't, it was just someone had called me to follow up on something I had done testing with. And I said, oh, it's been kind of like that 7 weeks since we've done the cross matching. Is there any? And whoever I was talking to, I can't even recollect who it was. They're like, oh, I think, the results are in. And she's like, oh, that's looking, it's looking quite positive, but there's sign off that still needs to happen, sort of thing. And I have no idea if they were supposed to say anything, but I was just like, wow, okay, this might be happening. So I get off the phone. I remember calling my husband and he is kind of like quiet. And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, I found out an hour ago. And I was just like, oh, okay. And there we both are in our workplaces. Not what I had imagined where we'd find out that he would be the match. But he needed to take, and it still gets me a bit teary, we needed to take those moments to be like, oh, wow, this is happening. And there's those moments that, the reality is that, they do happen at times. And it's a unique journey. And it's, it's pretty cool if you get to go through it with someone as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's a beautiful story, Kate. Thanks for sharing it. I know sometimes, wearing those two hats in your job and in, your personal experience, they blend together. So it's so valuable to hear your perspective. So, we've touched on some of these common sources of stress in this process, and we don't intend for this to scare you. I guess we hope to sort of prepare you, if you haven't started going through the process, or if you are in this process, again, just to validate that you're not alone, and this is a common experience, and you're in this together with other people. So again, it might be disappointing if no one comes forward. Of course, everyone hopes that they will find a living donor. But giving a kidney is a really big deal. and most of the population isn't willing to do it. And so sometimes no one comes forward, and that's really tough for people obviously to deal with. Again, fortunately, there is a plan B, which is the deceased donor. But still, you know, it is really disappointing. We talked about frustration, you know, not knowing whether you know you have a donor that's come forward, or disappointed when someone did come forward, but then they're not approved. Maybe they're not healthy enough to donate to you. And then, of course, you know, we can't minimize the fact that, you know, if you're in kidney failure, you're probably dealing with some symptoms as well. So that on top of, you know, trying to find a living donor. So perhaps you've heard this a lot, is, you know, take care of yourself. And, you know, I don't want to brush it off as something that's really easy. And so, you know, I wanted to just briefly go over some tips for coping with stress. This may be a reminder for you. You may have heard this all before, but, you know, I think as humans, we need things repeated to us in order for us to kind of move forward. And so one thing I wanted to encourage you to do, to remind you, is to focus on what you can control. There's so much out of your control in this process. And so you know, you may not be able to control the fact that some people may not come forward, or you're not sure if people are coming forward, but you can control, you know, getting the word out there, however you choose to do it. Of course, taking care of yourself, you can control that. Taking your medications, following your treatment plan, keeping your body healthy. So when your transplant moment does come, your body's ready to go. Keeping a positive mindset. This is not easy, I'm sure, sometimes. Looking after your mental health. It's, as a social worker, that's something that I say a lot. You know, it's just as important to take care of your mental health as it is to take care of your physical health. And, you know, as Kate said at the very beginning, you know, be easy on yourself. That's actually something that you can do that can really help your mental health, is to be easy on yourself. And so we all have healthy ways of dealing with stress, and we all have unhealthy ways. And so, you know, we hope with some support, you can lean more towards the healthy ways of dealing with stress. And I'm going to pass it over briefly to Kate to let you know some of the ways that the Kidney Foundation is supporting patients.
Awesome. Yeah. So and we've alluded to this, and I know it's come up in some of the small groups, and we've included it in our resources, but I really wanted to take a few minutes to highlight around a newish, kind of within the last couple of years, a platform where you can kind of go to look at the overall wellness of your kidney journey, no matter where you are, and it's the Kidney Wellness Hub. So if you haven't been yet, I would highly encourage you. And what this opportunity has is that there's different areas. There is your staying active. So there's lots of videos. So let's say, you know, especially during those early pandemic days and stuff like that, we're all looking for ways to, you know, stay active while being safe, sort of thing. And many of us are maybe slightly immune compromised in some ways too. And so we have to be conscious. Maybe we aren't going to the gym to get our activity, but walking, or there's amazing videos on the Stay Active page for all different abilities to get movement in your life, to keep that blood flow going and staying well. Eating is a huge component. Anyone living with reduced kidney function, dialysis, and even after transplant, there are certain things we have to watch and monitor. And the really cool part about the Eating Well section is it's building off of already amazing resources that are out there, like the Kidney Community Kitchen and other resources. We have some amazing partnerships with some great dietitians, and actually have some cooking classes. So another way to engage with others that might be going through this process and getting some maybe new exciting recipes in your book, to, you know, keep things interesting, because eating is important. It fuels our body. We need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, just like Christina said, so that we're ready as best as we can when transplant does come to us. Mental well-being well-being, this can't be undertaught. And I've just been in a session all day today where, mental well-being is a huge component, no matter what health realm that you're coming into. And so making sure to be able to take the time for you to stay well. And so Christina, do you want to speak to this one, or do you want me to develop a little bit more on this one?
This slide, yeah, you can go ahead. We do have the link here for
Yeah.
for everyone to check out what the Kidney Wellness Hub has. Is there anything else you
Yeah.
wanted to add about this slide, Kate?
Well, you can just see some examples here. And what I think is, there's wellness coaching. So this is a unique opportunity that, I mentioned a word, kind of having a goal of what you want to, what you're working towards in your life, just even personally, what you're wanting to set. And our wonderful renal social worker, Francine Gosling, is a wonderful, and she's a wellness coach and would be able to kind of help you kind of maybe focus in on what those goals are. So a super amazing opportunity that isn't always accessible. So make sure to check that out. Other options like stress busters, sleeping well, benefits of pets. Animals can play an amazing piece to keep our mental well-being well. Music therapy, the power of laughter, mindful relaxation, and coming soon, connecting with nature, which I know is one that I've utilized throughout my whole journey. Is just getting out, depending on where you live in this beautiful province or country. There's always spaces where it's beautiful to get out and just embrace and take a moment to remember all the beautiful things in our life.
Absolutely. I want to make sure we have enough time in the breakout group, so I'm just going to go quite briefly through these. And these slides will be shared with you afterwards with the link, so you can check them out if you think this might be beneficial for you. I wanted to mention briefly deep breathing. I'm not sure if how familiar people are on the call about this, but this is something that is well supported by science and psychology. Basically, it's trying to connect with our body's natural way to deal with stress, our natural relaxation response. And it's quite simple. Breathing deeply. It sounds like too good to be true, but apparently it does really help our natural to have a natural relaxation response. And similarly, mindfulness and meditation, this is not a new concept. This has been around for centuries, but it's more popular in mainstream society now because science has caught on to how beneficial this is for people physically, not just mentally, but physically. So if you want, you can check out these links as well.
Awesome. And I really wanted to emphasize on, with the Kidney Foundation, a number of the resources that you may or may not be familiar with. And our peer support program, we have the ability of one-to-one calls. So if you want to talk to someone that's been through transplant, we can connect you with somebody that's been through that experience. So you can have that kind of maybe more, one-to-one conversation and ask those direct questions. But also our groups as well, which I'll talk to on the next screen. I've already talked about the Wellness Hub coaching, and then the Facebook groups, Kidney Friends Circle, as well as the Kidney Wellness Hub Facebook group. Those are great opportunities depending on your level of interest in engaging with others. So our support groups there's virtual options, and this is just, again, the link will be, or you can scan the QR code. It should get you there. Make sure you're in your catchment, depending on where you are in the country. Just make sure it's on your branch, and then it will bring you up in the right time zones. So each month, this is just a quick snapshot of May, and a number of the sessions that are available. No matter where you are in the country, you can log in. And so there's different groups from everything from home hemo to a living donation, transplant, open groups, which is a variety. There's reduced kidney function, pediatric. There's a number of different options. So depending on where you are in your journey, there is an option for on an ongoing basis to connect virtually with a group that has a facilitator that takes you through the conversation and just gives you a space to share. So we really wanted to emphasize that, and building that tonight doesn't have to be the end of your communication with others that are going through, is that there's ongoing opportunities.
Excellent. And lastly, if you're really struggling to try to wrap your mind around trying to find a living donor, or just, struggling in the process. Again, this is normal, and a lot of people do struggle, so you're not alone. We do encourage you to reach out for support, and you don't have to do all of this alone. And so your kidney social worker is a really good resource. Although they may not be able to do intensive counseling with you, they may be able to do some informal counseling, or certainly, set you up with some tools and resources. And if you're not sure how to get a hold of your kidney social worker, you can talk to the unit clerk at your dialysis center or your kidney care center, or your nurse, or your dietitian. All of them should be able to connect you with the social worker there. Of course, family and friends. Counseling as a social worker, again, I'm a huge supporter of counseling no matter where you're at. You don't need to be in a mental health crisis to benefit from counseling. And of course, the BC Renal website.